Hello and welcome back to Fallout London. Today we're going to be taking a look at some 9mm pistols, some specifically German 9mm pistols. So today we're going to be taking a look at the Luger pistol and the Mauser C96 pistol that you can find in Fallout London. These are both fairly common weapons, especially the Luger. It's weirdly common in Fallout London. The Luger looks fantastic in this, like pretty much all the weapons do in Fallout London. And this is actually one of the few guns in this game that I have shot in real life, so that's pretty cool. I actually own a Luger, it's in the other room. Mine's actually not as in good condition as this one. Mine's actually got like duct tape wrapped around the handles because the handguards have fallen off before, so those need to be replaced at some point. But I do find it funny that mine's a little bit more battle worn than the one that you actually see in the game, and that's pretty much just from I'm assuming dropping it because it didn't always belong to me, so I don't know what exactly happened to it, but it was beat up by the time that I got it. Either way, let's go over the stats of the Luger. So the Luger does 45 damage per shot, which is pretty good. This is with the character that has all the damage stats. This one has good damage per second because it has 66 rate of fire, so you can shoot it fairly fast. Although one thing that is interesting about the Luger is that you can shoot it faster than you see the toggle locks move in this, and normally, when you're firing a Luger, you wouldn't actually notice the toggle locks even moving. It seems like they slowed down the animation for that so you could actually see it moving. It is a really cool operating mechanism that you don't really see on other guns all that much. I can only think of a few that actually use toggle locks, mostly because it's kind of overly complicated. Like a lot of German stuff, it's a little bit over-engineered. Looks cool, functions really well, but isn't entirely necessary. And this one has 125 range, 61 accuracy. This one only weighs 3, so they are pretty lightweight. Has a magazine of 8, and this uses the 9mm round, which is one of the most common rounds that you're going to be finding in London. And there's actually not a whole lot of different 9mm guns in this game. And funny enough, if you spawn in the 10mm pistol from Fallout 4, it is also converted into 9mm. And that is also kind of useful if you want to cheat in extra ammo like I did here so that I could have more footage for this stuff. For the general pros of the Luger and the Mauser to some extent, the Luger is incredibly common as well as it has very common ammo, so it's really nice to get in the early game, and it also has good damage per second. This was definitely a go-to weapon for me in my early runs of Fallout London. The only real con to these weapons is that they sort of fall off later, not heavily, they're not bad since there's not a whole lot of 9mm guns, but you could argue something like the Sten gun works a little bit better, or the Mauser, once it's tricked out, works a bit better than something like the Luger because it just has better options and it has more unique roles that it can fill. Where the Luger, I'm pretty sure, is always considered a pistol, even when you have it decked out and it should be more like a carbine. You think that would maybe count for a rifle, but I'm pretty sure it always counts as a pistol. The Luger is pretty decent though, and I'd put this one up into C tier. I think it's perfectly fine as a gun. Works really well throughout the majority of the game, and if you want to keep it with you at all times, you absolutely can, just for picking off small and weaker enemies towards even the end game. It does have quite a few mods though, which are interesting. So for mods, I'd recommend going with the advanced receiver. This will get you the most amount of damage. The Luger is semi-automatic only. You cannot turn this into a fully automatic version of it, which I kind of wish you could, because there is some unique mods that you can put on this, like the drum magazine that the real-life Luger did use in World War I, and there were full auto versions of it. It didn't work well during that time. You still see that same weird snail drum magazine. The reason why it looks like that is because it was made to go into a Luger pistol, which doesn't look as weird, but then they converted it to go into like the MP-18 submachine gun, and that's why it looks so strange in that gun, because it wasn't actually made for that gun. It was more converted for that gun. The barrels are actually really cool with this one because they have all of the standard barrels that were on the Luger, so you could go with the Army, the Navy, the artillery barrel, or the carbine barrel, which is actually how the Luger was made in real life. You especially see this in World War I, where different branches of Austro-Hungarian and the German military wanted different sized barrels for different jobs. If you were on the Navy, you got a certain length of barrel. If you were in the Army, you got a certain length of barrel. And if you were on the artillery, you got a really long barreled Luger. So that's kind of cool. The carbine barrel will get you the most. Although, sadly, your person still always holds the Luger just with two hands rather than actually using the carbine foregrip to actually hold it. I kind of wish you did that, especially since you can put a stock on this. I would recommend the quick drum eject magazine because that makes it so you go from holding just 8 rounds up to 32 rounds. Makes it so you get a whole lot more bullets. For sights, we only have iron sights or glow sights. I recommend you throw the glow sights on, and then you can throw a suppressor on this as well, and that would get you more damage with Mr. Sandman. The fully decked out Luger is actually pretty solid, and it works quite well as a... It's still going to always count as a pistol, so going with Gunslinger makes the most amount of sense here, but it does work pretty well as a carbine. It's actually a pretty decent weapon, and I'd put this one up into B tier. I think it's a whole lot better. Now let's move over to the other German pistol, which in this game it's actually called the Chinese pistol or Chinese submachine gun. depending on if it's full auto or if it's semi-auto. This is actually the Mauser C96, or a model of the Mauser C96, and yes, there was actually a whole lot of different versions of this gun. It was especially popular in China. That's partially one of the reasons why it's probably called the Chinese submachine gun in Fallout London, but it also has to relate to the Chinese pistol that was in Fallout 3, and to some extent the one that was sort of in New Vegas, but it is canonically the official pistol of the Chinese military in the Fallout universe. So I'm assuming that's the main reason why it's called the Chinese pistol in Fallout London. This one can be found around the mid-game. You tend to see raiders actually carrying this one around pretty often. And this one is pretty good because you can either get it in a full auto version or in a semi-auto version, which would also be accurate to the Mauser C96 because there were times where it was converted to full auto. For the stats of the Mauser, this one does 57 damage per shot, which is pretty good, has good DPS. This one has a slower rate of fire than the Luger at 46, although that's still fairly fast. This one has really long range for a handgun too at 287, that's unmodified. This one has 60 accuracy, weighs 3, holds 10 rounds in the magazine, and this one also uses the 9mm round. This one is kind of just better than a Luger pistol in a lot of ways. More so once you start really decking it out because it gets more mods than the Luger, and it can kind of work better as a general purpose pistol as well as it can work as a submachine gun, and that's pretty nice. For an overall rating for the Mauser pistol, I'd still probably say it's C tier. I would say the regular Mauser pistol and the standard Luger pistol are pretty on par with one another. The Luger does a little bit less damage per shot but has higher DPS. The Mauser has better range and it holds more rounds. Just depends on what you're looking for there. The Mauser does have a lot of different mods though. So for the receiver, I recommend the Mark III Advanced Receiver. This will get you the most amount of damage. Does take the most amount of points to actually get, but it is the best one. Then I'd recommend the Mark III Barrel. This gets you the longest barrel and gets you the best accuracy and the best range out of any of them for the pistol, which is nice. For a magazine, you can actually go up to a pretty absurd amount of rounds with the magazine because you have the 10 rounds, 20 rounds, 30 rounds, and 40 round magazine, which makes it so your gun is extremely tall. The 40 round magazine is going to be the best if you're using this in a full auto configuration. If you're using it in semi-auto, I tend to go with like the 20 round magazine because I find that to be good, and it kind of looks the best on the carbine. It's not too big, but I mean the bigger the magazine the better for a full auto weapon, just so you don't have to reload it as often. You can run a suppressor on this, although the suppressor kind of gets in the way of the iron sights a little bit, which is interesting, so it's a little bit awkward, but you're going to get more damage from that if you're going with Mr. Sandman, so I'd recommend that. You can actually put a vertical foregrip on this as well, which is accurate to Mauser carbines. That was actually something that was done in real life, so I put the Mark III on there because it gets you just the most amount of stability, and then I usually turn my Mauser to full auto and use it more as a submachine gun than anything. It actually works quite well at close and medium range. Even at longer ranges, the Mauser doesn't bounce around very much, so that's pretty nice. One thing that is a little bit weird is that you always hold the Mauser a little bit sideways, which works for a pistol. I kind of understand doing that, but it is a little bit strange once you have the full like foregrip and stock on there. Don't know why you entirely do that. I mean, it's probably just easier so that you don't have to do different animations or different looks to the gun. You can just do one. The Mauser tricked out like this is actually really solid though. It's a very good gun. I'd put this one all the way up into A tier. I think it's really solid and it's a super fun gun to be using. It also just has a very satisfying sound to it, and that'll do it for the German pistols that we have here in Fallout London. Figured these two worked best together. We still have quite a few other guns to check out in Fallout London as well. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Thank you guys so very much for watching it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.